Tuesday night was never special. It was the kind of night that disappeared into the background of 1,000 other Tuesdays, blending into a routine so predictable that I could have lived it blindfolded. But this particular Tuesday, tore through my life like a bullet. I wasn't supposed to be home early. That was the whole thing. If I had left the office just 10 minutes later, if traffic had been a little worse, if I had stopped for gas like I'd planned, none of this would have happened the way it did. But fate, or whatever cruel force governs nights like these, decided I needed to know the truth. The moment I stepped inside, something felt off. It was in the air, thick and warm like the house had been holding its breath. The lights were dimmer than usual, the living room couch slightly askew, the faintest trace of perfume lingering in a way that didn't belong to me, or her. Then I saw the jacket. A man's jacket, carelessly draped over the back of one of the dining chairs. Not mine. Too slim, too tailored, too goddamn expensive looking. My first thought wasn't even suspicion. That was the worst part. My mind, that idiot, tried to justify it. Maybe she had a friend over. Maybe her brother was across the country. Maybe a soft creak. A shift in weight. Presence. I followed the sound before I even realized I was moving. The hallway. Our bedroom door was cracked open, and beyond it, a sliver of movement the shape of bodies. Close. Intimate. The air snapped inside my lungs. I pushed the door open. There they were. Emily. And him. She was half-dressed, tangled in sheets that were supposed to belong to us. Her hair was tousled in that way that wasn't accidental. Her lips swollen, her breath still uneven. And him, some sharp-jawed, self-satisfied prick, frozen in the act of buttoning his dress shirt, as if that would somehow make this situation less damning. Emily's eyes met mine, and for a second, just 1 second, there was nothing in them. No guilt, no panic, just irritation, like I had walked in on her watching a movie and turned off the TV. Then she sighed. Actually sighed. You weren't supposed to be home yet. I stood there, frozen, my brain refusing to process the words that had just left her mouth. You weren't supposed to be home yet. Not I'm sorry. Not this isn't what it looks like. Not even an ounce of guilt. Just annoyance. Like I had disrupted her evening plans. The man, because I refused to think of him as anything else, had the nerve to keep buttoning his shirt like he was late for a meeting. His eyes flicked to me, sizing me up, but there was no fear, no shame, just quiet confidence like he already knew he was untouchable. Emily pulled the sheets around her, finally showing a sliver of fake modesty, and swung her legs over the side of the bed. Well, since you're here, she muttered, running a hand through her hair, I guess we should talk. Talk. She wanted to talk. I didn't even realize I was laughing until I heard the sound of it. Harsh, humorless, scraping its way out of my throat like broken glass. Talk? I repeated. You want to talk? She rolled her eyes. Rolled her goddamn eyes. Don't be dramatic, Daniel. Dramatic. I was standing in the wreckage of my marriage, and she thought I was being dramatic. I took a step forward, hands clenched so tightly at my sides that I could feel my nails biting into my palms. The man, no, the coward, instinctively took a step back. So he was afraid. Good. Who the hell is he? I asked, my voice dangerously calm. Emily sighed again, like she was explaining something to a child. His name is Brian. We've been seeing each other for a while. A while. A while. The words barely registered before the next ones came, sliding off her tongue like they were nothing. Honestly, Danny, I was going to tell you soon. But I turned on my heel and walked out. I don't know what was worse, her casual confession or the way she had the audacity to call me Danny. Like I was still the man she used to love. Like she hadn't just torn our life apart in a single breath. I needed air. I needed space. I needed to get out before I did something I'd regret. But as I stepped into the hallway, something caught my eye. A briefcase. Expensive leather. Gold initials on the front. BW. I knew those initials. Not because I'd ever met the man before. Not because Emily had ever mentioned him. But because his name was on the glass door of an office I passed by every morning. Brian Walker. Emily's boss. The world around me narrowed. The name on the briefcase burned itself into my brain, twisting my stomach into something ugly. Brian Walker. Her boss. My legs moved before my mind caught up, and suddenly, I was back in the bedroom doorway, staring at them. Emily was still sitting on the edge of the bed, lazily pulling her hair into a ponytail like this was just another morning. Like she wasn't sitting next to a half-dressed man who signed her paychecks. Brian, Mr. Harvard F*** ing graduate department head *, was adjusting his cuffs, still pretending he had the upper hand here. But I saw the slight shift in his weight, the way he kept 1 foot closer to the door. He was preparing to leave, to escape. Not a goddamn chance. So, this is how you got your promotion. My voice came out too calm, and that's how I knew I was close to snapping. Emily gave me a withering look. Oh, grow up, Daniel. Grow up. I nearly laughed. Brian finally decided to open his mouth. Look, I understand you're upset, but shut up. He did. Smart choice. Emily, on the other hand, had lost all sense of self-preservation. We haven't been happy in years, she said, like she was reciting a script. You had to have felt it, too. I mean, honestly, I don't even know why you're so surprised. I stared at her, barely hearing the words, because something else was boiling beneath my skin. It wasn't just the betrayal. It wasn't just the affair. It was the way she looked at me, like she won, like she had already written me off as nothing more than a minor inconvenience. A bump in the road before she moved on to her real life, one with a high-powered, suit-wearing, corner-office Harvard grad who, for some reason, thought sleeping with his employees was a good idea. That was the moment something inside me snapped into focus. She thought I would just leave, walk away quietly, accept the humiliation and disappear. But I wasn't going to disappear. I turned to Brian, tilting my head slightly. So, I said, how's your wife doing? The room went so still, I could hear the clock ticking in the living room. Brian paled. His mouth opened, then shut. He wasn't fast enough. Emily blinked. His what? I smiled. Oh, you didn't know? I turned back to Brian, whose face was doing a great impression of a blank sheet of paper. You want to tell her, or should I? Emily's eyes snapped to him. You're married. Brian exhaled sharply, rubbing a hand down his face. It's complicated. I let out a short, humorless laugh. Not really. Her name's Lauren. They have 2 kids. Cute ones, too. She runs that little bakery on 5th. Makes the best cinnamon rolls in the city. I let that hang in the air before adding. She also volunteers at the shelter on weekends. Real sweetheart. Emily's face twisted. Oh, you've got to be kidding me. But I wasn't done. I turned back to Brian, watching the way his fingers twitched. Lauren ever find out about your little office perks? I asked. Or am I the first husband to walk in on this crap? Brian's throat bobbed as he swallowed. I think you should leave. I smirked. Oh, now you want me to leave? Emily stood up, exasperated. Daniel just... But I was already walking away, reaching for my phone. She grabbed my arm. What are you doing? I pulled my arm free and held up my phone, calling Lauren. Brian moved faster than I thought he could. Brian lunged. Not with fists, not yet. No, a guy like him, a suit-and-tie Harvard grad, he wasn't the type to start swinging right away. He still thought he could fix this, control it, like he controlled meetings, promotions, and apparently my wife. But there are things you can't control, and the moment I stepped into that bedroom, his world started burning. I was just fanning the flames. Daniel, he said, voice low, measured, the same tone he probably used to negotiate million-dollar contracts. Let's be reasonable. I stepped back, phone still in my hand. Reasonable, I echoed, laughing under my breath. Sure, let's be reasonable, Brian. You sleep with my wife, in my house, and I'm supposed to, what? Shake your hand? Offer you a drink. Emily sighed loudly, rubbing her temples like I was the headache here. Danny, enough with the theatrics. Theatrics. The audacity. I turned to her, something sharp slicing through my chest. You don't even care? Do you? She just blinked at me. What do you want me to say? How about sorry? That made her laugh. A dry, condescending little thing that made my blood turn molten. Oh, please. You think you're some innocent victim? You were boring, Daniel. Stale. Stuck in the same job, the same routine, the same everything. Meanwhile, I was working my ass off, moving up, making something of myself. And you? She waved a dismissive hand at me. You were just there, like a piece of furniture I outgrew. A piece of furniture. Brian had the nerve to clear his throat, like he had a single right to speak. Look, I get that you're upset, but I turned on him so fast he actually flinched. You don't get a goddamn thing, I said, voice dangerously low. You don't get to stand in my house, in front of my wife, and tell me how to feel. His jaw tightened. What do you want, Daniel? What did I want? I wanted to rewind time, erase this night, go back to a world where my wife wasn't sleeping with her boss and treating me like an old chair. But since that wasn't an option, I unlocked my phone, scrolled to Lauren Walker's contact info, and pressed call. Brian exploded. Are you insane? He roared, lunging for me. I was ready. I stepped back just in time, and he missed, stumbling forward. But before I could react, Emily jumped between us, grabbing his arm. Brian, stop. Stop. Oh, now she wanted to mediate. The call rang once, twice. Brian turned back to me, eyes wild, desperate. Daniel, don't bring her into this. I met his gaze, held it, and pressed speaker. Hello. Lauren's voice was soft, pleasant, completely unaware of the hurricane about to hit her. Brian looked at me like a man standing on the edge of a cliff, staring into the abyss. Lauren, I said, my voice steady. We've never met, but I think we need to talk. There was a silence so thick it felt like the air had turned to cement. Brian's face drained of color. Emily's nails dug into his arm, her grip tightening as if she could physically hold him together. But there was nothing to hold onto anymore. On the other end of the line, Lauren's voice was warm, trusting, unaware. Who is this? She asked, confusion threading through her tone. Brian lunged for my phone again. This time, I let him get close. Just close enough for me to yank my arm away at the last second, watching him stumble forward like a desperate, drowning man. Daniel, I answered smoothly, my voice sharp, controlled. Your husband and I are currently in my bedroom, where I just walked in on him screwing my wife. A sharp inhale. Then silence. Emily lost it. Are you insane? She shrieked, her composure finally cracking. She turned to Brian, shaking his arm. Do something. But Brian wasn't moving. He wasn't yelling. He was just standing there, frozen, staring at the phone like it was a loaded gun. Lauren finally spoke. What? Her voice was different now. No warmth, no confusion, just quiet, shaking horror. I smiled. Not because any of this was funny, nothing about this was funny, but because I could feel Brian breaking apart right in front of me. And Emily? She was unraveling, too. Lauren, I said, how about you come over? See for yourself. Brian snapped back to life. He charged at me again, but this time I was ready. I sidestepped him easily, and he slammed into the dresser instead. A framed picture of our wedding crashing to the floor. Lauren, he choked out, breathless and panicked. It's not what it sounds like. I let out a sharp, humorless laugh. Oh, buddy, it's exactly what it sounds like. Emily turned to me now, eyes blazing. Stop it. You're ruining people's lives over one stupid mistake. I looked at her, really looked at her, and all I saw was a stranger. One mistake? I echoed. No, Emily. A mistake is forgetting an anniversary. A mistake is burning dinner. I gestured to the wreckage of our bedroom, of our marriage, of everything. This was a choice. Over and over again. Lauren's voice came back, steady but cold. I'll be there in 15 minutes. Brian's head snapped up. Lauren, don't. Click. The call ended. And for the first time all night, Brian Walker, the man with the tailored suits and the Harvard degree and the department head title, looked scared. Brian stood there, his chest rising and falling like a man who just realized he was trapped inside a burning building with no exits. Emily had let go of him now, taking a step back like she could somehow distance herself from the disaster she helped create. The silence stretched, heavy, smothering. Then suddenly Emily laughed. It was sharp, humorless, almost manic. You're really enjoying this, aren't you? She spat, eyes flashing. I tilted my head, considering her for a moment. You know, I said, voice calm. I thought I'd feel worse. I really did. Her mouth twisted into something ugly. You're so ing pathetic. Daniel. I smiled. And yet, I'm not the one begging a married man to do something. Her jaw tightened. For the first time, the self-satisfaction, The arrogance she had when I walked in, it was gone. Brian, on the other hand, wasn't even looking at her anymore. His mind was somewhere else, spiraling, unraveling. I watched him like a hawk, waiting for the moment the panic would turn to action, the moment he'd try to spin this in his favor. It didn't take long. He exhaled sharply, straightened his shoulders, and slipped right back into businessman mode. Damage control. His voice was lower now, slower, every word carefully measured. Daniel, listen. I get it. You're hurt, betrayed. But this scorched earth reaction? It's not going to help either of us. I raised an eyebrow. Brian took a cautious step forward, lowering his voice like we were co-conspirators in some shady deal. You're emotional right now. I understand that. But trust me, you don't want to make an enemy out of me. There it was. The threat. Emily stiffened beside him, turning to look at him properly for the first time since Lauren hung up. I saw the flicker of something in her expression. Realization. She had backed the wrong horse. I let out a slow breath, nodding slightly. All right, Brian. He relaxed just a fraction. Then I pulled out my phone again. His face darkened instantly. Daniel. Just checking something, I said casually, scrolling through my emails. It didn't take long to find what I was looking for. I turned the screen toward him, showing an email thread from a couple of months ago. The subject line? Investigation into harassment claims. Confidential. Brian's entire body went rigid. Emily frowned. What is that? Brian's silence told her everything she needed to know. I smirked. Turns out your new man has been in some hot water lately. I don't know if he mentioned it during pillow talk, but HR's been sniffing around. Something about inappropriate relationships with subordinates. Ring any bells, Brian? Emily's face drained of color. You knew. Brian said nothing. I took a step closer, watching him squirm. See, I wasn't planning to get involved in this, I continued, my voice light, conversational. I was gonna let it play out on its own. But now I think I'll be sending an email to a few people. Maybe attach a little security footage. You know, the kind that shows you walking into my house during office hours? Brian's entire body tensed like a live wire. You wouldn't, I shrugged. Guess we'll find out. Emily turned on him fully now, realization crashing over her like a tidal wave. You're gonna lose your job. Brian turned on her, snapping, Shut up, Emily. And just like that, the illusion shattered. The perfect man she had thrown her marriage away for? He was panicking, crumbling, and not once, had he looked at her like she was anything more than collateral damage. She opened her mouth, then closed it. For the first time that night, she looked scared. Good, because Lauren would be here any minute. And things were about to get so much worse. The minutes crawled by, heavy and electric, each second stretching the tension to its breaking point. Brian had stopped talking. He stood stiff, arms crossed, jaw clenched so tight I thought his teeth might shatter. Emily, on the other hand, had retreated to the corner of the room, arms folded, shifting her weight like she wanted to disappear. She was realizing something. Not just that Brian was in trouble, but that she was too. For the first time since I walked in on them, she actually looked nervous. Like maybe, just maybe, she had miscalculated. I could have told her that hours ago. The sound of tires crunching over gravel outside shattered the silence. Brian inhaled sharply. Emily flinched. Then knock. 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 Brian's head whipped toward the door, eyes wide. He turned to me, a silent plea written all over his face. Don't do this. I smiled. And then I went to open the door. Lauren Walker stood there, back straight, shoulders squared, dark brown hair swept into a neat, effortless bun. She was wearing a light blue blouse and black slacks. Professional, polished, the kind of woman who didn't waste time on nonsense. Her eyes flicked over me first, then drifted past my shoulder, landing on her husband. Her face didn't change. Not yet. Daniel, she said, voice steady. Tell me everything. I stepped aside. Come on in. She walked in, her heels clicking softly against the hardwood floor, her movements slow, controlled, like a predator surveying its prey. Brian actually took a step back. Lauren, listen. Shut up, she said. It wasn't loud. It wasn't aggressive. It was final. Emily looked between them, her face tightening. She had expected Lauren to be weak, to cry, to fall apart. Lauren just stood there, staring at Brian like he was nothing more than an unfortunate inconvenience. How long? She asked, still not looking at Emily. Brian hesitated. Lauren, how long? His mouth opened, closed. Then finally 6 months. Lauren didn't flinch, didn't blink, but something changed. I saw it in the way she shifted her stance, like a fighter adjusting before the final round. And you did it here? She asked. Brian swallowed. It wasn't planned like that. Lauren turned to me. Which room? I smiled. The bedroom. Emily let out a sharp breath, finally finding her voice. Okay, what is this? She snapped, glaring at Lauren. You're just gonna stand there and act like some kind of cold-hearted robot? God, no wonder he wanted someone else. Lauren moved so fast Emily barely had time to react. One step forward. One sharp crack across Emily's face. Emily stumbled back, clutching her cheek, eyes wide with pure, unfiltered shock. Lauren wiped her hand on her blouse like she had just touched something filthy. You're not someone else, she said, her voice smooth, cutting. You're a desperate little girl who thought sleeping with her boss made her special. Emily's mouth opened. Nothing came out. Lauren turned back to Brian. You, she said, are a pathetic, weak, gutless coward. Brian exhaled shakily. Lauren, don't. She tilted her head slightly, eyes sharp, calculating. I'm divorcing you, and since we signed a prenup, I'll be taking my money, my house, and full custody of the kids. But you, she stepped closer, lowering her voice to something dangerous. You're gonna lose everything. Brian's breath hitched. Lauren, please. I already called your boss, she interrupted. Sent him the security footage from your office. The one where you've been sneaking Emily into late-night meetings. Emily gasped. You what? Lauren turned to her, eyes flicking over her like she was barely worth the effort. You, she said, should start packing your desk. Emily looked at Brian, desperate now. You promised me a raise. Lauren laughed. A sharp, hollow thing. Oh, sweetie, she said, shaking her head. You were never getting a raise. And just like that, the reality of it hit Emily like a freight train. Brian was losing his job. Emily was losing hers. And neither of them had a single person left in their corner. I should have felt satisfied. Should have felt like I won. But the truth was, I didn't need to win. I just needed them to lose. Emily stood there, trembling, her perfect little world crumbling to dust around her. Her fingers curled into fists, nails digging into her palms. But she had nothing left to fight with. No sharp words. No condescending smirks. No lifeline to grab onto. She turned to Brian like he was supposed to fix this. But he was just as ruined as she was. Brian's breath came fast and shallow, his carefully constructed facade peeling away in real time. I watched it happen, watched the exact moment he realized there was no getting out of this. His career, over. His reputation, destroyed. His wife, leaving him with nothing but lawyer fees and a humiliating scandal. Emily saw it too. And that's when she did what rats do when the ship starts sinking. She turned on him. Are you kidding me, Brian? She shrieked, stepping toward him with wild, desperate energy. You told me no one would find out. You told me this was safe. Brian flinched. Emily, not now, not now. She spat. You let me throw away my marriage for this. You told me you had influence, that I'd get a promotion, that, oh, give me a break. Brian snapped, shoving a hand through his already disheveled hair. You knew exactly what this was. The room went dead silent. Emily's face twisted. Excuse me? Brian exhaled sharply, turning on her with the same coldness he had when he thought he could threaten me. You think I was going to marry you? That I was going to build a life with some woman who couldn't even be discreet? He let out a hollow laugh. Jesus, Emily. I told you what you wanted to hear because you were easy. Emily staggered back like he'd slapped her. You? Her voice was barely a whisper now. You bastard. Lauren scoffed. Oh, now you see it? I leaned against the doorway, arms crossed, just watching, enjoying. Because this was better than any revenge I could have planned. They were devouring each other. Emily turned to me, eyes wild, pleading. Daniel, don't you see? This was a mistake. He lied to me. He manipulated me. I never meant. Asterisk, I held up a hand, cutting her off. Emily, I said calmly. I don't give a single F asterisk 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 about what you meant. She froze. You think you're the victim now? I continued, stepping closer, watching the way she shrank under my gaze. You chose this, over and over again. You lied to me. You humiliated me. And for what? This? I gestured to Brian, who looked like he was actively calculating if he could escape through the window. This was your grand prize? Your big upgrade? Emily swallowed hard. Lauren turned to me then, voice smooth and amused. So what now? I thought about it for a second. Then I smirked. Now? I stepped forward, stopping just in front of Brian. Now he gets exactly what he earned. And then I threw the first punch. Brian barely had time to react. My fist connected with his jaw, a sharp, satisfying crack splitting through the air as he stumbled backward, slamming into the dresser. The lamp crashed to the floor, shattering, but I didn't care. For months, this guy had been sneaking around with my wife, lying, smirking, acting like he was better than me. And now he was just a panicked, scrambling mess, clutching his face like he'd never been hit before. Are you insane? Emily screeched, running toward me. She grabbed my arm, nails digging into my skin. Stop it. He's not worth it. I shrugged her off like she was nothing. Oh, now you care about him? I spat. 5 minutes ago, you were blaming him for ruining your life. Pick a side, Emily. Brian groaned, pushing himself upright. But before he could say a word, Lauren moved. And she moved fast. Before anyone could react, she grabbed the closest thing within reach, a half-empty wine bottle from the dresser, and swung. It wasn't the kind of hit meant to knock someone out. No, Lauren was too refined for that. Instead, she smashed it against the wall right next to Brian's head, shards of glass raining down as he flinched violently. Jesus Christ! He gasped, eyes wide, pressing himself against the dresser like he could disappear into it. Lauren leaned in, her voice dangerously soft. You should be thanking him, she murmured, because if Daniel hadn't thrown the first punch, I would have done much worse. The room was silent. Emily stared at her, mouth open, like she was seeing Lauren for the first time. I smirked. Told you she wasn't weak. Lauren straightened her blouse, stepping back with a look of pure disgust. You disgust me, she told Brian, her voice sharp. You think you can just sleep around and keep your shiny little life intact? You're finished, Brian. I've already spoken to the board. Your resignation will be expected first thing in the morning. If not, well, let's just say HR is very interested in what I have to say. Brian looked sick. Lauren, please save it, she snapped. Pack your things. Find a lawyer. And when you get to our house, wait, sorry. My house? You can sleep in the guest room until you find somewhere else to live. Asterisk, he swallowed hard, nodding, too afraid to argue. Lauren turned on her heel, looking at me with an unreadable expression. You should go, she said. Neither of them are worth another second of your time. And she was right. Emily was still standing there, stunned, looking between us like she had just realized she wasn't in control anymore. I stepped closer, lowering my voice just enough for only her to hear. You always looked down on me for dropping out of high school, I murmured. Well, starting tomorrow, your new Harvard husband is unemployed. Emily's breath caught. Her lip trembled, but she said nothing, because there was nothing left to say. I walked out of that room without looking back. I could still hear Brian muttering frantic half-sentences to Lauren, trying to salvage something, anything, of his wrecked life. I could feel Emily's eyes burning into my back, but she didn't follow me. She didn't call my name. She didn't beg. Good. She wasn't worth it. The air outside was cool against my skin, a stark contrast to the suffocating heat of betrayal that had been choking me all night. I sucked in a deep breath, trying to shake off the adrenaline. It wasn't over yet. Not by a long shot. There were papers to sign, a marriage to legally end, loose ends to tie up. But for the first time since I walked into my house that night, I felt something close to peace. Lauren stepped outside a moment later, her heels clicking softly on the pavement. She stood beside me, arms crossed, eyes focused on the horizon like she was already moving on. That was satisfying, she admitted, her voice calm. I huffed a short laugh. Which part? She smirked. All of it. For a second, we just stood there, two people who had been blindsided, humiliated, burned to the ground by the people we trusted most. But the difference was we weren't the ones left in the ashes. Lauren sighed, glancing at me. What now? I exhaled. I don't know. Get a lawyer. Get my house back. I turned to her. You? She shrugged. Same. Then, after a pause, maybe take the kids on a vacation while Brian figures out which gas station will hire him. I grinned. Harvard degree's really paying off for him. Huh? She smirked. Karma's efficient like that. I nodded, rolling my shoulders, shaking off the weight of the night. Well, I said, stepping toward my car. Guess I'll see you in court. Lauren watched me for a moment, then nodded. Guess so. I pulled the door open, slid into the driver's seat, and let out one last slow breath. Then I drove away, leaving them all behind.